there's a sibling with darkness in that sibling, right? Darkness in there. So we have selfishness, number one. And of course, when you're around your families during this day, sometimes there's some unaddressed and unanswered issues. Why you're in the middle of what you're in the middle of, right? How many have ever asked yourself, why am I in this family? What's the deal? Why was I born in this time? Why now? Right? Why these folks? Why are my siblings not full of light? What's going on here? Anybody ever say that? Especially around Christmas holidays. That's when rivalries happen and fallouts happen and everything else happens when you have family gatherings. It's very unfortunate, but there's a reason for it. Number one, we're going to talk about selfishness, but not in the way you think. Hopefully everybody's familiar with the book of Daniel. Specifically Daniel's prayer that Daniel had. Daniel, mind you, was in the wrong kingdom, away from his people. He was in Egypt, away from his people. Totally out of position and everything else. And he arrived there when he was a small boy, young boy. But he loved the Lord. When Daniel prayed, I wonder how many people took note that Daniel didn't really pray for himself. Anybody ever take note of that? In fact, I noticed the prophets in their prayers and declarations and statements from the Lord, they did not pray for themselves either. I noticed that. I noticed them many times when Isaiah, Ezekiel, all these individuals, when they communed with the Lord, that was one thing, but when they prayed, normally, they would request things for their people. You see, God has not promised us tomorrow, but the promise of Abraham still stands. The promise of fulfillment still stands. The Lord will finish the work he began in the earth. And all of his children will be redeemed. In the process of doing that, though, and we're talking about selfishness, we're going to look at Daniel. Daniel did not pray for himself, but he prayed for his people. For the most part, he prayed for his people, especially if you follow chapters 8, 9, and 10, you see that he was specifically focused upon his people. He had a great concern for his people, and a letter or a prayer of repentance for his people he did have right before chapters 11 and 12 took off. Daniel saw his life as one of servitude, but he was focused upon his people. Keep in mind, though, Daniel was in the wrong kingdom, but he affected everybody around him. Daniel did. He wasn't focused on his issues, because if he was, he would have prayed to the Lord to release him out of that place into another place. But because Daniel was so inclined and set his heart towards his people, the Lord blessed him bountifully, even as being a captive, so to speak, in a different place. Many of you are similar to that. You feel captive in your families. You may not say that, but all too often people feel this way. They don't feel a natural part of their own families. You have to ask yourself, why did the Lord set me down in the middle of this family that I really don't have a lot in common with? We don't see the answer to that. Number one, but no small part is due to selfishness. And what do I mean by selfishness? It's probably not what you're thinking. Again, Daniel prayed for his people. He fasted for his people. He repented for his people. He acknowledged iniquity on behalf of the people. Daniel's heart was set towards his people. And everything Daniel did in the order of the Lord. But why? Because the love for his people was a driving element in Daniel's life. Keeping his relationship with the Lord, standing as an example, changing people around him. He ignored his own situation. And he was frightened a few times, nervous at least. Being thrown in the lion's den, that would shake most of us. But Daniel loved his people. He had his heart set on his people. Daniel was not selfish. Daniel stood as an example even when nobody was looking. But we read about Daniel today, and it helps our lives out to know how he stood in times of great adversity. Which reminds me of something else. Many of you, before you came to the Lord, you've had examples in your life, examples that you talk about to this very day. In fact, when it's something notable, many of you will bring up your grandparents or someone who was not selfish, but sacrificed. There's somebody that you know that was full of sacrifice, and they did just about everything for other people, and this is how you remember them. Those happen to be the people that stand out in your mind. You saw them go through things, yet they sacrificed for other people. You saw them without, yet they sacrificed for other people. They were so influential in your life as an adult that you refer to them. When these great moments come up, you'll say, well, but that was my grandmother was like that. And there's a sense of, almost a sense of pride behind it, a sense of thanks. But when you had the relationship directly with them, you didn't see it all. When they were alive, you didn't see it all. You saw their struggle. You heard some of their advisements. But only when you went through your transition did you really remember the person they were. That's when you knew you had a gem in your life. That's when you knew. When you went through your transition. Take note of how they lived. Again, I tell you their character stands out because they sacrificed, because they were not selfish. You didn't see them saying, woe is me 24 hours a day, because those people that say, woe is me, what do? You get away from those folks. No, the ones who stand out in your life are those who sowed into other folks' lives, even while they were suffering. It made a huge impact, and the Lord did that on purpose. But how do you think they felt? Being around so many people, but they were the only ones sacrificing the way they did. Did you notice? You saw what they went through. They were your example. It's not that you were so good that you were right there with them and you saw everything because you did everything right. No. God made it so you could see them, but God placed them there just for you. And then later on in your life, it seems like they come alive in your life. Do you see that? See, all of us had some sort of an example. For many people as grandparents. For some people as uncles. Mothers and fathers, extended family and friends. Even people that are acquaintances. You saw them stand during impossible times. You saw them when God wanted you to see them. Why? Because they were examples for you. And all that were around you. You see, if you can reflect upon them and the impact they had upon your life, then you'll begin to understand your plight or your life and the things in your life. See, because somebody is watching you. The email that I received was about siblings with demons in them. But I tell you, we weren't exactly filled with holy angels either. Yet, all of us, just about all of us, were given an example. Somebody who pushed through, somebody who stayed themselves on faith, somebody who you just knew at times was going to give in, but they did not. Somebody that if you talk about them right now, it will elicit all types of emotions because you saw them struggle, and yet they stood as a great example in your life. They stand out in your life. Why, though? Because they were not selfish. Because they pushed through. You saw them stay themselves with a certain standard. They were anchored. They were not your anchor at that time, but I tell you, as you grew and when you had your moment with the Lord, you can hear them so clearly now. You can understand what they were saying now. You can see the sacrifice that they gave now. Now it makes sense, but back then it did not. Many of you have family members you may not get along with. Family members that criticize you. Family members that may not see you the way you want to be seen, but I tell you, they see you. For some reason, they know your situation. Because they're meant to know it. You see, a time will come. Doesn't matter if you think they're full of demons or not. If they were really full of demons, I'm telling you, a time will come. It does not matter if they dipped over into the wrong lifestyle. A time will come. A moment will come. An intimate moment with them and the Lord. It comes for everybody. And during that time, God will bring back to their remembrance the examples in their lives. They'll have demonstrations of strength, of faithfulness, of all sorts of things. And you're wondering why you were placed in the middle of that family. Why do you have this sibling the way they are? Why do you have that family member the way they are? Why are things the way they are? Why are your children the way they are? Because before God was going to send them, he sent you first. Just as he sent your grandparents first, or your mother, father, that influential figure in your life, they came first. And then you came. Why? Because he sent an example just for you. He put that example in situation after situation so that you could see, so that you could glean. And now you're placed on this earth before somebody else came. And one day they're going to look back on you. Your situation may not be favorable to you, but you've got to see it in truth. To see your situation in truth means you know the Lord put you here on this earth in the family you're in. Those people who have come around you or who you're related to, or if you're adopted, you're right smack dab in the middle. That was on purpose. That was not a mistake. He didn't put you right in the middle of a holy concession. He didn't put you in the middle of a bunch of lights who believe the same way you do. Nope. He put you in a place that needs a light. He put you in a position where you could be seen, and your flaws could be seen, and your mistakes could be seen. Why? Because I tell you, if they see your mistakes and your flaws and your struggles, they're also going to see your faith and your steadfastness and your resolve. The Lord put you where he put you for a reason. It's for the very ones you say may be lost. How many of you would be lost if you did not have that example that God sent in your life? How many of you in times of great stress have thought about those who came before you, and because you saw their resolve, it gave you the additional strength because you saw an example to push through? The Lord knows what he's doing. And I tell you, he put you right smack dab in the middle of a hornet's nest on purpose. He put you in that situation on purpose. He put you in the middle of a storm on purpose. Because somebody's watching you. Somebody needs to see the real struggle. They also need to see the real sacrifice. They don't need the fake stuff. They need the real deal. They're not going to acknowledge it right now. You think they're not looking. I tell you they are. You're the one who was influential in your life may not even know that you talk about them this very day. They may not even know that they were your strength. Representatives of the characteristics of the Most High. The Lord knows what he's doing. See, many of you, you pray, you say, Lord, get me out of this. Lord, change this for me. Lord, help me to do this, that, and the other. You do that. But see, you're not the only ones. The ones before you said the same thing. But I tell you, even they had an example. And here you are, put right in the middle of some controversy, sticky issues, weighty matters, and it's very important that you go through all of them. But selfishness is to disregard what the Lord has done for you through others and to only think of yourselves. If you can reflect upon those influential people in your lives and then look at your situation again, you may see the truth of it. You may say, oh, Lord, hold on, don't remove it. Don't remove it. Let me continue because I see what you're doing. Don't remove it. If you take your time to look through your own circumstances, even if you cause them, you may be able to glean a blessing that will come out of it, not for you, but for those who know your situation. The Lord encourages us on a continuous basis to love our neighbor, to love our enemy. Everything he teaches us is to sow our hearts into somebody else. Let me ask you this. Then why would he send you here for a different reason than for the sake of somebody else? If he teaches us how to love our neighbors unconditionally, to love our enemies unconditionally, then why would he put you here for any other reason than to be an example in that love for somebody else? No, they're not going to recognize it now. You probably can't even talk to half of the folks they're going to have their moment and remember you because you're the one that believes. You're the one. You're the one that went through everything. You're the one nothing worked out for like it did everybody else. But you're also the one that God kept and you can't deny it. Somebody's watching you. Somebody knows about you. They're going to have a moment. They're going to have a moment with the Lord. And in that moment, you're going to be the one they see. You're going to be the one they hear. Don't ever think for a moment when you're talking to your children, talking to a sibling, talking to anybody, that they don't hear what you're saying. Yes, they do. Your grandmothers, your parents, those influential people, they thought at one time you weren't listening either. But when you were older, you recalled exactly what they said. And who brings that back to your remembrance? The Lord does. He'll bring that example back over and over again in your life. And I'm telling you, in most cases, it is the difference between life and death for us. To see that small example does a major thing for us. We walk by faith. But my Lord, he has shown us so much evidence. He knows that we suffer in areas of faith. And he sends us example after example. We cannot deny that. Now it's your turn. Your turn to be an example for somebody else. The very ones you think are totally lost are normally the very ones you're sent to be an example for. You may not ever see their change, just as your grandparents or those that came before them didn't see your change. But the change came, didn't it? They likely did not know why they were in the middle of their predicament either. But if you could talk to them right now, you would say, oh, no, don't think that. You did so much. They would say, well, what did I do? I don't recall what I did. You could probably name more than they could. Just as somebody else will name more than you can. You're there for a reason and a purpose. You're there for the sake of somebody else. And once you come out of the realm of selfishness and begin to live for the sake of somebody else, that's when you begin to see it. That's when you begin to know it. Many people get around their families. It really does. It brings up controversial points and everything else. Stay the course. Stay anchored. Stay in faith. Do your very best because the Lord is using you for the breakthrough of somebody else. Is there any greater honor than to be utilized for the salvation of somebody else's soul? Is there any greater honor or greater usage in the earth than to be used for somebody else's salvation? Yes, God can do it himself. He does not need us. But he placed you a light in the middle of darkness for a reason. The children you have, they're not your children. They're your brothers and your sisters. They only came by the biological pass down, right, from you. But they're your brothers and your sisters. And you have been selected to nourish them up until a certain point. That'll make you look at your children differently, won't it? The Lord does a marvelous work. Sometimes due to a lack of the word. But the word comes. We don't know these things. We don't think about them until the Lord brings it into our minds, or somebody has a problem which causes somebody else to answer something. Then these subjects come up. But it's always good to know that the Lord is doing a complete work within all of us and everything is purposed. The Lord knows the very count of the hairs on your head. Do you really think something in your life is happening outside of his control? No, it isn't. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, he did not know the conditions as to why he was thrown in there. But he was thrown in there anyway. We know by reading. That's another element in the Bible that many of us were not really aware of. Is in the Bible, in these stories, the prophet was not aware of the conditions as to why things happened, but because of their faith, they stood the test. They stayed the course. They became an example of so much for so many. Even to us, without their faithfulness, who would we read about? Who? Do you see? No matter what you go through, how long it's been lasting, and what you think about it, your Father in heaven has everything to do with it. Your You're sent here to break up something and to put back together. You may not perceive it, you may not know it, but I tell you, the moment is coming in those people's lives. And if you stay the course, you're going to come up in their minds. Somebody's going to cry for you. Somebody's going to thank you. They will. You may not be alive when that happens. It's very seldom do you ever get to know this. Do your grandparents, do they know how much of a difference they made in your lives? Those people that were put in your lives to be influential figures, do they actually know how much of a difference they made in your life? They probably do not. Do they understand? Do they understand what type figure they were to you? They probably do not. Do they understand the importance of themselves? They probably do not. But you know it now. You didn't even know it back then, but you know it now. You're sent here the same way, for the sake of somebody else. Their moments will come. No, they're not going to be holy. No, they're not going to listen. They're going to act like they don't want to hear you. They're going to act like they don't hear you, but I tell you, they do. How many children act like they didn't hear their parents? We acted like we didn't hear our parents sometimes. We didn't want to hear what they were saying sometimes, but we heard them anyway. You don't like people to see your struggles. They know about them anyway. Haven't you found that out yet? Because when they know your struggle, and they also know your faith, and they know it's difficult, and they see you struggling with things, to know that you stayed the course, it's going to mean everything to them during their moment. And the Lord set this up. And it's an honor, not a curse. You see, everybody has a moment when the truth of Christianity is made known to them. And in that moment, that's when they make a choice. When the Lord presents a truth to them. Not when we present the truth to one another, but when the Lord presents the truth to them. When he causes them to have understanding of a great many things, just as we had understanding of certain things our parents did after the fact. So will they have understanding of what you were talking about after the fact. It'll make a big difference if we stay the course. If we stay the course, if we put forward what we can put forward. That is to say, expect many transitions in your life so others can see you weather the storm, withstand the assault, get to a point of weakness where it would have taken out everybody, but they heard you call upon the name of the Lord. They need to hear it. Because one day their moment will come. They're going to be on their knees ready to give up, and a thought of you might pop in there. They'll see you at a moment when you look like you were ready to give up and should have given up. But they say, no, they didn't give up. They stayed the course, and I am too. See, the Lord knows we need examples. He already knows this. Even in the Bible, it's full of examples of what works of men, isn't it? The works of men. Because we can easily relate to other people. But we cannot so easily relate to things we cannot see. So through men, he gave us an example. And they went through everything to help our faith. It is an honor to be one of those vessels, to be selected to go through everything for the sake of somebody else's faith. See, when you're not selfish, when you're not thinking about your own situation only, but when you're thinking about your people, those who come after you, you begin to pick up on things like this. Daniel is a perfect example. He prayed for his people. Are you praying for yours? Daniel loved his people. Do you love yours? All of us have people. See, with Daniel, it was those of Israel. To us, it's those who are within our families. That's your people. Not so much color. It's not based upon race and all this other stuff people bring up. No. It's based upon the circle God put you in the middle of. Those folks around you are your people. Do you desire? See, none of us are promised tomorrow, but we know that generations continue, don't we? We know that. We're not promised tomorrow, but humanity is going to be alive up until the time, a certain time in Revelation, till everybody's changed. Because we know this, somebody's coming after us. And if somebody comes after us, the Lord is surely going to use us for their good, for their breakthrough. You may not have seen it this way, but because you believe, I'm going to tell you something. Those influential people in your life were specifically used as a living scripture in your life. Didn't you notice that when you're reading the Bible, those people pop up in your mind? Not only in your time of difficulty, but when you're reading the Bible, you'll say, well, my grandfather was like that. My grandmother was like that. My so-and-so was like that. Well, this person I knew, they were like that. My point is, when they were right there before you, you weren't thinking that way. After they were gone, it seems like they meant everything. After they were gone, all of what they went through in life has changed your path in some way, form, or fashion according to the Lord. He used them as an example, and it helped you and strengthened you. You're going to be used for the same thing, and you are being used for the same thing. See, when I found this out, that's when I stopped trying to duck out of every issue or situation. I said, okay, no, this can't happen unless the Lord deems it so. So if he deemed it so, if he's allowing this to happen, it's for a reason. Because I've noticed everything I go through when people can see me. Have you noticed that? Anybody out there notice that? There are some private things I've gone through, but they're nothing near those things I went through when everybody could see me, when everybody could find out about it. How about that one? You ever think of that? Those things you go through by yourself when no one is watching is for you, because the thoughts that hit your mind are more intimate thoughts relating to your character. But when other people can see you, your story or what you go through is often relates to what the prophets went through, to what these figures went through in the Bible. You become a spectacle to so many around you. And let me ask you here's the big golden question. How in the world do they know about your life so intimately anyway? Why is it that they can see everything going on with you? How did they find this stuff out? I'll tell you, it's meant for them to know. You know what gives us massive strength? It's when we see those who came before us. You see them giving so much, and they're struggling doing it. But they never stray from giving, no matter what they're going through. That gets us, doesn't it? And when Satan comes around and says, oh, they didn't do too much, you'll pluck him out of the way and say, you're a liar from the beginning. No, they did everything. You'll start defending the one you wouldn't listen to. Isn't that funny? You'll say, no, Satan, you can't mess up this story. It's almost like we safeguard the life of those who were influential before us, not allowing Satan to discount anything for us. We'll say, no. No, this person was strong. But see, in their minds, in your grandparents' minds, in those influential people who came before you, they were not strong. They had doubts too. And they had an example also. They did. Now you're placed on earth to be that example to somebody else. You may not know who it is, but it is somebody. And at a specific time and moment, the Lord will open up their understanding, cause them to understand some things. You will have been that vessel to be utilized to get somebody else through. But there's no greater honor. My goodness. See, I told you, this topic of selfishness would be a bit different than what you thought. Parents, now you know. That's why it's important for children to see what they see. You may not like it all the time, but I tell you, you're being sent here for great work in somebody else. And there is no greater work than that work involving the salvation of a soul, the redemption of a soul. There's no greater honor